Welcome back to the Wolf of Property and Casualty. I'm your host, Derek Glasniak, with over 15 years of commercial broking experience, focused on the middle market, upper middle market, national accounts space. This is another episode of Commissions to Convictions, which outlines what I learned about reaching the absolute pinnacle of success in sales, specifically property and casualty sales, and watching it all tumble down and fall apart, and inevitably leading to 3 months in jail. And what I learned while I was incarcerated, and some of the revelations that I've made. And today's episode is choices versus mistakes. When I was sitting in front of the judge in December of 2025, not knowing my fate, and keep in mind for those, probably most of you who have never been in this circumstance, you're sitting there and you don't know what's going to happen. There was a chance I could go to jail. There was a chance I could go home. But when you walk into that courtroom, whatever gets decided there is up to the judge. It's sentencing. And you have an opportunity to talk and you submit letters of recommendation. But I think the thing that's most jarring, the thing that keeps you up at night as you walk in there is that whatever they decide, you leave right from there. It's not like the movies where you get to go home and then you report to serve your sentence. And so it is really jarring. And what you're saying in front of that judge really, really matters. And I'll never forget what the judge said to me prior to sentencing me. He called out after I read my personal statement. What he said to me is, among many things, I really appreciated when you talked about some of the things that you did, that you didn't use the word mistake. He said most people standing before him often apologize for the mistakes that they made. And I had come to grips with a lot of the things that I had done not being mistakes. Yes, certainly they were mistakes, but ultimately what they were choices. And when you start looking at some of the things that you've done in your life, specifically the things that you're not proud of, and you start realizing and separating the difference between a mistake and a choice, the once you accept that those are choices, it allows you to take a lot more ownership of them. And that ownership then can lead to change and corrective action. But I want to unpack this a little bit, the difference between a choice and a mistake. I want to talk about that and correlate it to two stories that I have, as I've done in these series, one from my time in jail and one from my time working as a professional. And I'll start with my time working professional. I had this client, probably my favorite client, terrific people, unbelievable operation. They were in the kind of logistics and space management. One of my very first clients, a $1.5 million account, but I enjoyed all the hard work because they were so appreciative. And they had some very nuanced parts of their insurance program. And we sold them a policy. It was based on the exposure or revenue. But that revenue was highly fluctuating in their line of work. You would ask for an estimate so that they could quote the policy. They would give you 25 million, but depending on how the economy went and how logistics went, it could easily be 17 million. It was just highly susceptible to fluctuations over the course of the year. And I would always tell this customer, you know what? Don't give me the knock it out of the park number. As much as I want the big number because it's going to drive the rate down, give me a realistic number and just know that if you come in below because the rates change or the economy softens a little bit in this space, we'll be able to get an audit and we'll be able to get some return premium back to you. So you might pay in at, say, $25 million, but if at the end of the year you report 18 million, that $7 million difference multiplied by the rate will get it back to you in a return premium. And this is a brand new policy, something I hadn't worked with. And I'm used to that, right? Work comp and general liability and all those policies are always getting an audit. And I said it as if I knew for a fact because that was my assumption. What policy wouldn't have an audit that's so highly tied to a revenue number? Well, we get to the end of the year with that policy, and the E&S carrier that I was working with said, hey, Derek, and of course, what exactly happens, they come in about $8 million less than their estimate, and they're saying, can you give us a calculation on what that audit return will be like? And I go to the carrier and I say, hey, when are you doing the audit? Well, there is no audit. We don't say minimum earned premium, which would be a trigger in my head. Whatever that number is, we'll audit it up. Meaning if you said 25 million and we'll go to 30, we'll charge you for the extra 5 million, but we don't audit down, even though the policy didn't say minimum earned premium. And I pushed and pushed and I fought, and ultimately I couldn't win this. And I had to go back to my customer at the time, one of my favorite customers, big account, well over $100,000 in commission a year. And I had to tell my customer, hey, I made a mistake. There is no function to audit this policy. And so we won't be able to get what amounted to $6,800 in premium back to you. I used the assumption of an audit to help guide you pick your exposure. And I told you that it would be there, and it's not. There is no audit that'll be done. That is a mistake. I made that mistake. I didn't read the policy thorough enough. I relied on what I thought I knew. All of those things are mistakes. there wasn't a intentionality to it. I wasn't misleading them. I didn't try to get a bigger number so that I could get a lower quote or a cheaper rate. I made an honest mistake, one of carelessness and one of assumption, but I made a mistake nonetheless. And I contrast that, and I've mentioned before I was in jail and I worked in the kitchen running Meals on Wheels, and I saw a lot of characters come in and out who wanted to work but didn't really want to work. And there was a younger guy that was in there, and he was in charge of prepping all the special diets for the inmates. So in jail, it's very common to say you're diabetic or say you have a religious or say you're vegetarian, because in some ways, if you do that, you get access to some better food. You don't get the normal slop that's served out there. Anyway, one individual is in charge of putting together all the special dietary meals. And this individual was running a scheme, all the things that you realize are currency when you're in jail because money's not really a thing. And hard boiled eggs are one of those things that were like gold in jail. And this individual had worked out since he was creating the meals in the kitchen. He could load up all of his buddies' breakfast packets with like 4 or 5 hard boiled eggs, and then they would get routed to. He was using those to trade for, screen time or, potato chips or something on the back end. And he was running this, and I knew about it, but you never say anything. He was running this for, I don't know, like 3 weeks, and he got a little bold. He started putting so many hard-boiled eggs in these packets that somebody finally picked one up and said, "Why is this so heavy?" And he got caught, red-handed putting all of these extra hard-boiled eggs. And I remember him getting into a yelling match when he was being fired from the job, which was not a good thing when you're already in trouble for being in jail. And he keeps saying, "I just made a mistake. I made a mistake. I thought I could just put whatever I wanted in there. I made a mistake." And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You made a choice. You made a choice to do that because you wanted to get what you were getting on the back end from that. That was a choice. You knew that you shouldn't do that. Don't say you were making a mistake. You're not making a mistake. You made a choice to do that." And just like I made a choice to drink and drive after I obviously shouldn't. I made a choice to drive my car when I shouldn't have. I made a choice to get involved in an inappropriate relationship with my account manager fueled by drugs and alcohol. I made those choices. He made a choice to try to steal eggs and send them because he was getting something. That's different than me making a mistake about an audit versus not an audit. But when you think about what you're doing and some of the things that maybe you reflect upon in your own life, try to think about, were they based upon a mistake or was that a choice? Mistakes have consequences. So do choices. With my client, that mistake resulted in us giving back the equivalent amount of money in terms of commission. We gave back $6,800 to the client at the next renewal to make up for our mistake. Just because they were some level of innocent doesn't mean that there's no consequence. Mistakes have consequences too. Choices seem to have a lot more consequences. My choices led to some of the worst moments of my life. The choices of the person who was putting eggs in there and stealing them from the kitchen, they got moved to a really horrible part of the jail and lost their privileges, and they were going to serve out their entire sentences. So it's not to say that one has consequences and one doesn't. It's just to say that there's a difference between choices and mistakes, because whether it's a choice or mistake, you don't want to necessarily repeat them over and over if you want to continue to live the best life you can.